The stars above Earth had never looked so silent, so still, yet behind that quiet sky, something was coming. It began without warning, just a ripple across the outer satellites, a flicker in the deep space telescopes. And then, presence. Massive ships, not like anything Earth had ever built, arrived at the edge of the solar system. They did not hide. They made themselves known, surrounded by a glow that bent light and shadow alike, symbols etched into their hulls that no one could read. Earth's space agencies scrambled to respond. The United Nations was thrown into emergency talks, and all across the globe, people stared at their screens as news anchors tried to explain the unexplainable. The aliens had not attacked, but their silence was heavier than any weapon. Then, one day later, they spoke. A single voice echoed through every device, translated perfectly into every human language. It was not a request. It was a declaration. The Council of Galactic Order acknowledges the rise of your species. In accordance with ancient law, you are hereby required to provide tribute, 10% of planetary resources, full access to your genetic libraries, and submission to interstellar oversight. The message ended as sharply as it had begun. No explanation. No room for questions. Humanity had been noticed by the stars, and the stars were not friendly. Within hours, panic spread. Governments met behind closed doors, and military forces moved quietly into high alert. But something was different. Humanity had long imagined first contact. Some thought of friendship, others of war. But this was worse. This was arrogance dressed as diplomacy. On a high-orbit station, President Maya Rourke of the Earth Union stood before a wall of screens as her advisors argued over how to respond. Scientists warned that the technology behind those ships was centuries beyond theirs, while generals insisted Earth could not show weakness. The aliens, known simply as the Council, were not asking. They were demanding, as if Earth was just another stepping stone in a long history of conquest. What few people knew was that Earth had been watching too. Deep in a hidden command center, the Stellar Surveillance Division had tracked strange energy readings in nearby systems for months. They had suspected something, just not this. Rourke listened in silence until the room fell quiet. Then she spoke. If we give them what they want now, it will never end. They'll own us without firing a single shot. A decision was made, not in rage or fear, but with the cold precision of people who understood the stakes. Earth would not bow. But saying no to a power that ruled thousands of worlds was not a matter of pride. It was a matter of survival. Preparations began at once. The Council had given Earth 7 cycles to respond. In that time, old alliances were reignited, secret research was accelerated, and prototype ships were pulled out of testing and quietly moved into orbit. Engineers worked day and night. AI systems were reprogrammed for warfare, and deep in the Arctic, a forgotten bunker labeled Leviathan Protocol blinked to life for the first time in 30 years. The people of Earth didn't know what was coming, but they could feel it. Cities continued as usual, but with a nervous undercurrent. People looked up more often, watched the news with wide eyes, whispered in crowded streets. Students discussed alien politics between classes. Soldiers drilled with sharper focus. Scientists stopped sleeping. Across the globe, people were afraid, but also curious. Who were these aliens, really? What right did they have to demand anything? And most importantly, what would happen if humanity said no? The Council's broadcast had ended with coordinates, an exact place in orbit where Earth's response was to be delivered, either in person or via transmission. The message was cold, distant, but its meaning was clear: submit or be made an example. Meanwhile, high above the Earth, within the command deck of the alien flagship Varanth, the Council's chosen emissary observed the blue planet with a mixture of boredom and contempt. This was a routine encounter for him. Another primitive world stumbling into the galaxy's attention. Another reminder of how small most species were compared to the Council's long dominant history. He had no reason to believe humanity would be different. They always submitted in the end. Some begged, Some offered gifts, a few resisted, briefly. But the end result was always the same: obedience. The emissary, named Calrith, filed a short report stating that Earth was a Class 4 civilization, technologically young, culturally unstable, with fragmented leadership and outdated weapons. In his opinion, they would cave before the deadline. But Earth's silence unsettled him. Most species responded immediately, trying to negotiate or plead. Earth was quiet, watching, waiting. That silence made Calrith uneasy, though he would never admit it. On the sixth day, something unexpected happened. A rogue transmission was picked up by the Council's ships. It was encoded, but deliberate. A single word: acknowledged. No explanation followed. Calrith sneered at the message. But deep inside, something flickered, an instinct he hadn't felt in a long time. On Earth, President Rourke stood before a quiet control room as the final preparations were set in motion. She looked at the countdown ticking across the screen. Less than 24 hours. She knew they were outmatched, outgunned, maybe even out of their minds for what they were planning. But she also knew one thing with absolute clarity: humanity had never responded well to threats. Throughout their history, whenever someone tried to conquer or demand, humans found a way to fight back, not because they always won, but because they refused to lose without a voice. Now, standing at the edge of something bigger than anything their species had ever faced, that same spirit burned brighter than ever. Across every continent, from orbiting stations to underground bases, humanity wasn't preparing for peace or surrender. It was preparing to deliver an answer. A bold one. Maybe a final one. But it would be theirs, and no one else's. As the seventh day dawned, and the Council ships aligned for the official response, all eyes turned toward Earth, not just to see what it would say, but to find out if this species, so young and so bold, was truly foolish, or something else entirely. As the seventh day arrived, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. In the vastness of space, just beyond the orbit of the moon, the Council's fleet floated like shadows carved from steel, cold and unmoving, waiting for Earth's reply. Their command vessel, the Varanth, opened its deep space channel precisely at the hour marked in their demand. They expected either silence, a reluctant voice, or the usual list of surrendered assets. But what came next was none of those. On every frequency monitored by the Council, a transmission emerged. Clear, calm, and shockingly short. A woman's voice, steady and without hesitation, spoke one word: denied. For a moment, the Council bridge remained silent, as if the meaning had not registered. The translation AI rechecked its data twice. The commander, Calrith, stared at the screen, waiting for more, perhaps a plea or a nervous explanation. But nothing followed. Earth's signal ended exactly 4 seconds after it began. Calrith's eyes narrowed, confusion mixing with something darker: disbelief. No species had ever refused so directly, so simply. Most tried to bargain, delay, or at least offer tribute in part. But this was defiance in its purest form. On Earth, in a command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, President Maya Rourke stood with her advisors in silence as the transmission ended. She had rehearsed a longer response. She had practiced speeches full of strength, unity, and diplomacy. But in the end, she realized the Council didn't deserve a speech. They didn't come in peace, and they weren't asking for anything. They believed Earth would bow just because they had power. But humanity had learned, over centuries of hardship and survival, that true power wasn't just technology or numbers. It was the will to stand firm when everything said to run. The room around her burst into activity as confirmation signals poured in. Defense systems went live. Ships repositioned. Orbital sensors tracked every movement from the Council's fleet. Still, no immediate retaliation came. Calrith paced across the bridge of the Varanth, his clawed hands tapping against the polished metal rail, anger slowly rising behind his composed face. He had delivered Earth's defiance to the Council's High Assembly, And the response was exactly what he expected. Authorization for a limited demonstration of force. Not full-scale war, yet, but a sharp warning. Enough to crush Earth's confidence and force them into compliance. Calreth selected 3 Earth targets, 1 orbital platform, a deep-sea mining rig, and a low-orbit satellite hub. The strikes were to be precise, disabling, not lethal. He believed fear would work better than fire. But Calreth did not know what Earth had built in silence. The first Council attack began without warning, a pulse of directed energy meant to fry circuits and shut down systems. It struck the satellite hub cleanly and failed. What Calreth didn't know was that Earth's engineers, using stolen Council tech from black market fragments recovered in deep space, had learned how to shield their systems against precisely this kind of energy. The attack hit, flared, and fizzled. Then came Earth's reply. Not a voice, not a threat. Action. From the dark side of the moon, a cluster of hidden railgun platforms activated for the first time. Built in secret and powered by experimental fusion cores, they fired tungsten slugs at hypervelocity speeds. They did not aim at Council warships directly. Instead, they targeted the relay drones and supply vessels floating behind the front lines. Within seconds, 2 of the drones were gone, shattered into silence. The Council ships turned, shocked. Earth had just drawn blood. In the command bunker, Rourke watched the footage, her face unreadable. She turned to her military advisor. "They'll escalate now," she said quietly. "Are we ready?" The general, a hard-faced man named Keller, nodded once. "As ready as we'll ever be." Meanwhile, the rest of the galaxy began to listen. The Council's channels were not as private as they believed. Word began to spread across border worlds and minor colonies. Earth had refused. Earth had struck back. Small rebel factions and oppressed species who had lived under the Council's rule for generations began to whisper the same question. What if the humans win? On the Council flagship, Calreth ordered a larger strike. This time, no more warnings, no more games. He launched 2 hunter drones toward Earth's upper atmosphere, armed with plasma payloads capable of turning cities to glass. But as they entered the mesosphere, something unexpected happened. They disappeared. No explosion. No signal lost due to jamming. Just gone. What Calreth didn't know was that Earth had deployed its most secret defense, Project Widow, an eye-controlled stealth net of satellites equipped with quantum interference tech, capable of masking themselves completely and generating artificial gravity wells to drag incoming threats off course or crush them entirely. The drones were neutralized before they ever saw their enemy. Calreth's face twisted in frustration. This was not how things were supposed to go. Earth was supposed to be loud, chaotic, weak. Instead, it was silent, calculated, and unflinching. Back on Earth, scientists worked in underground labs, patching together data from Council broadcasts, analyzing ship designs, decoding alien mathematics at speeds only enhanced minds could manage. They weren't trying to catch up. They were trying to leap ahead. That was the secret of Earth's rise. They didn't evolve step by step. They sprinted in chaotic bursts, powered by desperation and creativity. And now they were applying that same spirit to war. President Rourke knew they couldn't win a full war, not yet, but they could make the Council hesitate. They could make them bleed. And most of all, they could make them afraid. As Earth's response echoed across the stars, people from distant worlds watched and listened. Some hoped Earth would be crushed, fearing the Council's wrath might reach them too. Others prayed Earth would stand tall, because if one species could resist, maybe others could follow. Calreth, back on the Vareth, began to realize he had made a mistake. This was not a primitive world. This was a species that had already survived its own worst horrors. Climate collapse, world wars, artificial intelligence uprisings, pandemics, extinctions. They had come through all of it, scared but unbroken. And now, as they looked at the galaxy for the first time, They did not see gods or masters. They saw competition. Earth had spoken, not with long words or trembling hands, just one word. But in that single word there had been a storm, a promise, and a warning. Now all that remained was to see how far that word could carry. Across the stars, the council began to whisper among themselves. For the first time in centuries, someone had dared to say no, and meant it. The first real battle between Earth and the council did not begin with a declaration or a warning. It began with silence, followed by sudden fire. After Earth's defiant denied and the unexpected destruction of council drones, the galaxy expected retaliation. And they were right. But what no one expected was how quickly the rules would change. The council, humiliated by Earth's refusal, ordered Calreth to begin the enforcement protocol, a series of precision strikes meant to cripple Earth's ability to resist without causing immediate extinction. Calreth believed it would be easy. He had reviewed Earth's fleet strength, scanned their known technology, and dismissed them as overconfident primitives playing with stolen toys. What he didn't understand was that humanity had never played by the rules of others. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, inside a carved-out military base, hidden since the earliest days of Earth's space expansion, Earth's secret weapon was waiting. It was not a bomb, not a new kind of missile, but an idea made real, something humans had only theorized until desperate times forced them to act. They called it the Ghost Flotilla, a group of stealth warships, coated in adaptive alloys that bent light and radar, piloted by AI systems linked directly to human tacticians through neural feedback. These ships had no flags, no visible engines, no broadcast signals. They moved like shadows, waiting in the darkness between Earth and Mars. When the Council's enforcer fleet moved into Earth's orbit, expecting a display of dominance, they found nothing blocking their path. No defense grid, no fleet in formation, just a quiet planet spinning below. That calm lasted only 10 minutes. The first shot came from behind Saturn, where Earth had placed a decoy communication array to bait long-range scans. As the Council ships focused sensors on the false signal, a kinetic slug traveling at nearly 30 kilometers per second ripped through the command ship's side hull. It didn't explode. It didn't have to. The sheer force of impact turned half the ship into molten metal and sent the rest spiraling. Before the wreckage even cooled, the Ghost Flotilla moved in. Firing in precise, coordinated waves, the human ships tore through the outer ranks of the Council formation, targeting engines, comms, and support drones with brutal efficiency. The Council's response was delayed, not because of weakness, but because of confusion. Their systems had never encountered such clean jamming, such unpredictable flight paths. The AI guiding Earth's ships changed tactics every second, as if reading the future, reacting faster than any Council commander could adapt. And above all, it fought like a human, with emotion, with spite, with a sense of vengeance behind every move. Calreth, watching from the Vareth, shouted orders as explosions filled the view screen. He demanded a full scan of the battlefield, but sensors returned only static. Earth's forces were using a layered cloak of electromagnetic noise and false data pulses, making it nearly impossible to track them. The Council ships began firing wildly, hitting empty space and debris, wasting power while Earth's ships danced between them. On Earth, in a dim war room lit by glowing maps of space, President Orcs stood with her commanders, watching every move. She said nothing, letting the silence be filled with the sound of calculated resistance. Every time a Council ship was disabled, a message was broadcast on the Council's own channels. We will not be ruled. Leave our skies. But Earth wasn't aiming to win the battle completely. They knew their limits. Their ships were fewer, their resources stretched thin. Their goal was fear, to make the Council hesitate, to show the galaxy that Earth was not prey. That lesson came fast. Across other Council-controlled systems, whispers turned to action. A mining colony on the edge of the Tarthan sector refused its latest tribute. A small species known as the Velari blocked council ships from landing on their homeworld. The signal was spreading. Humanity's defiance was more than noise now. It was a spark. Calrith finally ordered a retreat from Earth's orbit, enraged but smart enough to recognize that continuing the fight would only result in more humiliation. As his ships limped away, the Varanth was the last to turn, damaged but still functional. And from the command deck, Calrith watched Earth shrink into the distance, with a new feeling rising in his chest, not just anger, but doubt. For the first time, he was no longer sure the Council was untouchable. Back on Earth, there was no celebration. The silence after battle was heavy, filled with tension and loss. 2 of the Ghost Flotilla ships had been destroyed. Their crews, connected directly to the neural systems, were lost instantly. Memorials were held in quiet corners of Earth's scattered colonies. But no one called it a defeat. What they had done was impossible by old standards. Yet it had happened, and now the stars were watching. In the days that followed, Earth's message was sent again, this time across wider frequencies, translated into dozens of alien languages. The message was not poetic or complex. It simply said, "We are not your subjects. Come with peace, or don't come at all." Calrith returned to the High Council, his report incomplete and full of uncertainties. The council leaders, being so old and comfortable in their power that they barely moved during discussions, reacted with quiet fury. They ordered an emergency summit. The word war was spoken for the first time in a century. But some voices within the council were cautious. They pointed out Earth's unexpected resilience, their strange technology, their ability to inspire rebellion. A species that grows stronger under pressure is not to be underestimated, one elder said. Calrith was told to return, not with weapons, but with spies. Earth was no longer a backwater planet. It was now a strategic threat. But Earth, too, had begun planning the next move. Their scientists continued to work day and night, reverse engineering council wreckage, testing wormhole drives, expanding the AI systems that had turned the tide. Their focus was not survival anymore. It was momentum. The galaxy had awakened to their existence, and now they would not sleep again. On a cold night in Geneva, standing under the stars that had once seemed so far away, President Work whispered to her advisor, "We didn't start this. But if fire is what they understand, we'll burn until the sky remembers who we are." Above her, satellites shimmered like watchful eyes, and somewhere in deep space, the first human scout ships left the solar system, silent, unseen, and carrying with them the will of a planet that refused to kneel. The message was no longer just in words or broadcasts. It was written in every strike, every resistance, every mind that refused to be ruled. Fire didn't ask permission. It simply burned, and Earth had only just begun to light the fuse. Across the stars, cracks began to form, not in metal or glass, but in loyalty, in the invisible bonds that once held the galaxy in the Council's grasp, like a clenched fist. It started quietly, as these things often do. A Council-controlled trade station on the outer rim of the Nerethi cluster failed to report in for 2 days. Then a Council relay beacon in the Joran Belt stopped broadcasting. At first, the High Council thought it was sabotage. Maybe the humans had sent more of their stealth ships. But when scout vessels arrived at those locations, they found something more troubling. The stations were intact, untouched by war, but abandoned. Entire crews had vanished, not out of fear, but by choice. Messages scrawled on the walls in dozens of languages, all sharing a single idea: no more masters. This ripple of rebellion wasn't Earth's doing, not directly. Humanity had lit the match, but the fire now had its own direction. On faraway worlds where alien workers had labored under council taxes for generations, underground networks started forming. On planets where tribute had been demanded in the form of resources and even lives, whispers of Earth's resistance turned into secret meetings, then into open protests. The Council tried to respond as they always had, with shows of strength, threats, and the cold presence of warships in low orbit. But things weren't the same anymore. Soldiers sent to enforce control found their orders questioned. Some refused to fire on civilians. Others defected, joining rebel groups forming in the shadows. Even within the Council's ranks, cracks appeared. On the floor of the Grand Hall, where leaders of the elder species once debated in calm arrogance, voices were raised, and not all of them were in agreement. Calreth stood among them, silent now, his pride wounded, watching as fear replaced certainty. The elder races argued not just about Earth, but about the very system they had built. A few demanded a full-scale assault on humanity, to crush them before their influence spread any further. But others, older, wiser, or simply more afraid, cautioned against it. If you strike them down now, one of the elder Cinereth warned, her voice cold but calm, you make them martyrs, and the fire will spread faster than we can contain. But the fire was already spreading. On the planet Hellion 4, a Council garrison was overthrown by its own soldiers, half of them young recruits who had watched Earth's defiance and realized they were only tools in a much older game. On the mining moon Vothra, a rebellion led by engineers and builders shut down production entirely, and for the first time in decades, no tribute was sent. In every sector, something had changed. It was not just a war anymore. It was a shift in belief. Across Earth, the news came in like a tide. At first, officials were cautious. They didn't want to believe the Council was weakening. But the data didn't lie. Trade routes were being disrupted. Council patrols were retreating. Signals from rebel factions were requesting help, or at least guidance. President Work called an emergency council of her own, gathering her top minds not in a war room, but in a research chamber deep under Antarctica, Earth's new diplomatic command center. "This is bigger than us now," she said, her tone serious but not grim. "We sparked something, but now we must decide. Do we lead, or do we step back and watch it burn?" Her advisors argued. Some believed Earth wasn't ready to lead a galactic resistance. They had too few ships, too little experience. Others said this was the moment destiny had delivered, and hesitation would be their undoing. In the end, Rourke chose a path in between. Earth would not crown itself as a leader, but it would be a voice that could be trusted, because it had earned that trust through fire. So broadcasts began. Messages sent not in threats, but in offers. "We will not rule you," the transmission said, broadcast on open galactic channels. "But if you stand for your freedom, we will stand beside you." These words, so different from the Council's tone of control, shook many who heard them. For the first time in generations, the galaxy was being offered partnership instead of dominance. Calreth watched these messages from his quarters aboard the Varanth, now docked in the high orbit of the Council's capital world. His hands were clenched behind his back, eyes staring out into the starfield. He had underestimated the humans. He had treated them like pests, not realizing that Earth's strength was not in their numbers or ships, but in their refusal to break. A younger officer approached him, hesitating before speaking. "Sir, 3 more outposts have gone dark," she reported. Calreth nodded slowly, dismissing her with a wave. His mind was elsewhere. The High Council was fracturing from within. Alliances between elder species were being tested. Old treaties were being questioned. The Council had always relied on fear to rule, but now fear had turned against them. On Earth, plans were already moving forward. The Ghost Flotilla had been expanded, its AI cores upgraded with new learning protocols. A second human fleet was being built, not for defense, but for outreach. Ships designed to make contact with the rising rebel factions, to offer aid, supplies, and tactical support. Human engineers, working with salvaged Council tech, had developed a hybrid drive that could allow faster-than-light travel without needing Council routes. The chains that had once kept Earth bound to the edge of the galaxy were now rusting and snapping. And still, through it all, there was no celebration. Humanity knew the storm was far from over. Rourke reminded her people in every speech. Freedom is not won in a single fight. It is earned over time, paid for with courage, and defended with unity. Yet beneath her calm leadership, the pressure was growing. Council assassins had been caught on Mars, trying to sabotage a fusion reactor. Espionage attempts increased. Earth's data networks were under constant attack, and some rebel worlds had already turned to violence and chaos, desperate and unorganized. The galaxy was not just splitting between Council and freedom, it was breaking in unpredictable ways. And that, perhaps, was the greatest danger of all. But humanity had lived through chaos before. Earth's history was carved in conflict. They did not fear the unknown, they adapted to it. And now, standing at the edge of a fractured galaxy, they did not see enemies everywhere. They saw possibilities. Even Calrith, hardened and loyal to the Council's core, began to wonder, was Earth truly the enemy, or simply the future arriving faster than expected? As he stood in silence, watching another rebel signal disrupt the Council's secure channels, a thought crept into his mind, unspoken but powerful. What if control is no longer possible? What if this is the age of choice? The fracturing had begun, and no one, not even the Council itself, could stop it now. The word that changed everything was not shouted in battle or whispered in secret. It was spoken plainly, without pride or fear, by a single human voice on an open channel that the whole galaxy could hear. The war had not officially begun, yet the galaxy was already at war with itself. Worlds once quiet under Council rule now trembled with rebellion. Not always organized, not always clean, but burning with the same message: control had failed. Council fleets scrambled across systems to hold power, to remind everyone that order must be obeyed. But every time they tried to put the fire out, another spark appeared elsewhere. They didn't know where to strike, because the rebellion had no center anymore. It had become an idea. Earth had lit it, but now even they struggled to keep up with how far it had spread. In the chaos, President Rourke received a message. It wasn't sent through standard channels. It came through an ancient frequency, one used centuries ago by Earth's first space probes. It was from Calrith. The message was short. Talk. Council Hall. One delegate. One word. Her advisors warned her, urged her not to respond, said it was a trap. But Rourke wasn't afraid. She had seen enough to know that fear was how tyrants stayed in power, and trust, even when dangerous, was how leaders built futures. So she chose her delegate carefully. Not a general, not a politician. She chose a linguist, Dr. Myra Lane, a quiet woman who had spent her life studying the power of words across cultures and time. Myra boarded the diplomatic vessel alone, carrying nothing but a translator device and a simple datapad. The ship passed silently through neutral space, escorted by no fleet, unchallenged by Council ships, as if even they sensed this moment was different. When she arrived at the Council Hall, she stepped into a chamber that had witnessed centuries of declarations, judgments, and sentences. But today, it was quiet. Every seat filled, every eye watching. Calrith stood near the center, flanked by advisors and elders who once viewed humans as nothing more than newcomers to be taxed or tamed. He gestured to a platform. Myra stepped forward and looked around, her heart calm, not from confidence but clarity. "I'm not here to beg," she said, her voice soft but carrying. "I'm not here to threaten. You asked for one word. You already know it." The room was still. One of the elders, her skin like flowing crystal, leaned forward. "Then speak it." Myra nodded once, then said the word. "Choice." A pause followed, longer than a silence, more like a shift in gravity. The room didn't react with shouts or applause, but with something heavier: understanding. She continued, explaining not with long speeches or clever arguments, but with simple truths. "You ruled through control, through fear, but control is breaking, and fear is no longer enough. The galaxy doesn't want to be ruled. It wants to choose how to live, who to trust, what to become. You can't stop that with ships. You can only respond with choice of your own. Will you fight the future, or will you join it? Some in the chamber were unmoved. Some were insulted, but not all. Calreth did not speak for a long time, then finally asked, "And what does Earth choose?" Myra answered without hesitation. "We choose to stand with anyone who wants freedom, with anyone who respects life, with anyone who says no to fear." The word began to spread. Choice. It was broadcast, whispered, written across shattered walls and digital skies. And unlike words of war or power, this one did not demand. It offered. Across rebel planets, leaders began to unite, not under Earth's rule, but in alliance. Treaties were signed, open markets formed, science and defense shared. Humanity was not building an empire. They were helping build something new. The Council, once so sure of its place above all others, now faced a decision it had never imagined: adapt or collapse. Some species pulled away from the Council entirely, not in anger, but in exhaustion. They had ruled for too long. It was time to rest, to watch, to let others rise. Calreth remained, watching it all unfold. He still believed in order, but something in him had shifted. Maybe it was Earth's resistance. Maybe it was the word itself. He did not give up power, but he changed how he used it. He began speaking not with commands, but with invitations. He opened dialogues with planets that had broken away. And slowly, grudgingly, he found that people listened. Because even tyrants, if they are willing, can become something better. On Earth, celebrations were quiet. The sky was not filled with fireworks, but with new satellites, new listening posts, new alliances. Ships came from distant stars, not with weapons, but with ideas, with culture, with hope. President Rourke, standing before a crowd of humans and aliens alike, gave the speech that would be remembered long after her death. "We did not defeat the Council," she said. "We changed the question. This isn't about who rules the stars. It's about what kind of stars we want to share." Myra returned home quietly, refusing fame or titles. She went back to teaching, reminding students that sometimes one word, spoken in the right moment, by the right voice, can shift the course of history more than any fleet ever could. The galaxy was still not perfect. There were still fights, still power struggles, still shadows that refused the light. But the game had changed. No one would ever again assume that Earth was weak. No one would ever again believe that silence was peace. The word echoed across languages, across species, across generations. And in that echo, the future began. Not with fire, not with fear, but with choice.